So we're not in the midst of a preaching series right now, but I have a title for my homily, and it's Too Perfect to Be Good. Is that possible? Too perfect to be good, right? And what I want to talk today about is just how we often find ourselves in a dilemma. And I don't know about you, but most choices in life where I find myself in a dilemma, it's not this choice between evil and good. It's most of the time, what's the right thing to do, right? What's the better of two goods? And that's the kind of dilemma I think I do, probably you do as well, face more often than, just absolute evil versus good. And I presume that since we're either online going to church or physically going to church, our intention is to be good. We want to do what's right? But that's not always easy. It's not always easy to say exactly what's right or what's the better of two rights. So to test what people do in a dilemma, Princeton University several years ago did this. They put people in a dilemma between two goods. They wanted to see and investigate what people do when faced with two goods. And they used a population of seminarians to test this. And so the seminarians knew they were in a study, but they were told they were in a preaching study. They were assigned a scripture passage to write a short homily on, and then they were going to deliver their homily to a group of people who were going to critique them on their homily. Well, the seminarians, would be told to go to a certain place at a certain time to give their talk. And when they arrived there, and of course this was all set up in advance, there'd be a note on that location on the door saying that the location of the talk was moved to the opposite side of campus. So these seminarians would, if they didn't have a lot of extra time, would have to rush over to the other side of campus to the new location to give their talk. Now there was an actor planted on their route. And this actor pretended to be distraught, hurting, some sort of pain, moaning, in some sort of distress. And they wanted to see what the seminarians would do, because it's a dilemma between two goods, isn't it? Be punctual, be on time, that's my reputation at stake, versus be merciful to the person who was suffering. So now this is a population of seminarians. You'd think they'd be predisposed to act in one way versus another. So what do you think? Was it higher or lower than 50% of the seminarians that stopped to help the man in distress? What do you think? Higher or lower? Yes, much lower. Much lower. And what do you think the passage that they were assigned to preach on was? The Good Samaritan. They wanted to be perfect, didn't they? They wanted to have a perfect homily because they were going to be judged on it. And they wanted their homily so perfect that stopping to care for somebody along the way didn't quite fit into the picture. So what they did find is those few seminarians who had given themselves an abundant amount of time, extra time, and were not in a rush, they were the ones who were much more likely to stop and help the man. So it really depended more on how much extra time they had rather than their convictions as to whether they helped somebody. But they were put in a dilemma, right, between two goods, and they were being examined as to how they would react. Well, Jesus sets up the same exact dilemma in today's gospel, the familiar story of the Good Samaritan, right? Because there's a scholar of the law. Now, this is the Jewish law, and he's a scholar of the Jewish law. And he wants to test Jesus because the scholars are not particularly fond of Jesus because he doesn't always follow the exact law, the Jewish law. And so to test him, asks him a question, and Jesus puts it back to him. Well, what is you're basically saying, well, you're an expert in the law. You tell me what the law says. So what does the scholar of the law say in reply to Jesus' question? He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your being, with all your strength and with all your mind. And he combines it with another law. He's actually putting two laws together. And you love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, you could not have given a more perfect answer. This man is a perfectionist. He gives a perfect textbook answer. And Jesus praises him for giving a good answer. But you know what? He's one of these perfectionists that just can't leave it alone, right? He just can't leave it alone. And so he wants a definition of neighbor. Well, who's my neighbor? Because according to Jewish code, you had to treat certain people lovingly and with respect, and then there were other people in other categories who you were allowed to hate, right? Samaritans were in the group of people who you were allowed to hate because they weren't pure Jews. They were not Jerusalem Jews. They were from Samaria, and they had some other practices, and they didn't worship in Jerusalem. They didn't think you had to go to Jerusalem to worship. And so they were considered a lower, by the Jerusalem Jews, the purists, the perfectionists, they were considered a lower class of Jews, right? So you were allowed to hate them. It's okay. But not so. So Jesus tells the story of 4 men, one almost beaten to death, a Levite and a priest. So they're also going to be Jerusalem perfectionist, right? Jews wanting everything perfect. Why do they pass on the side of the road? Because they don't care? No, they're caught in a dilemma between two goods. If I'm on my way to Jerusalem to worship, I can't come in contact with either a dead body or blood. That would make me ritually impure, and then therefore I could not offer worthy sacrifice to God. So they're upholding ritual purity as a good. And mercy is not particularly important right now because I've got to worship God perfectly. And if I help this person, I'm not perfect. And then who does Jesus put in the role of the Good Samaritan? A Samaritan, right? And then asks the man, who do you think was neighbor to the injured man? And notice his answer. He cannot put the two words in the same sentence, Samaritan and neighbor. He can't do it. He can't do it. And so what does he say? The one who treated him with mercy. He can't even say the Samaritan. Can't bring himself to actually do it. Because all his life, he's been taught, according to the law, you can hate some people and you got to love others. Right? And Jesus puts him smack dab in a dilemma between two goods, between ritual purity and mercy. So, brothers and sisters, I think that's more where we are in life, as I said at the beginning of my message. I think I find myself more in life trying to figure out between two, I think this is the right thing to do, or maybe that's the right thing to do. I'm not sure what the right thing to do is. It's rarely the case where I'm thinking to myself, should I do this really evil thing, or should I do this good thing, right? It's the dilemma that we get stuck in that makes life messy. Life can be messy. So what do? Well, let's look at the gospel, because I think Jesus in today's gospel is teaching us what we can do when life gets messy, when we can't put everything into nice, neat categories between good and evil, right? Those people I can love, those people I can hate, right? when we can't put all of life into nice, neat boxes, nice, neat categories, it all gets messy and it all gets difficult to work with. And sometimes we're in a dilemma. What is the right thing to do? What is the good thing to do? So let's look at today's gospel, right? Today's gospel, Jesus' message to this man who wants to be perfect is mercy is superior to ritual purity. When it comes down to praying perfectly versus helping somebody in need, get your butt in gear and go help the person, right? You can pray later. You don't need to necessarily have ritual purity. Now, what's a concrete example of that? I'll give you one that I've dealt with on a number of occasions. On a number of occasions during my priesthood, a couple have come to me, who have grown children, married children, and the scene unfolds something like this. Father, our son had a child, and next week's the baptism, and we're not going. When he got married to his wife, they were married in a Catholic church, and she promised to raise the kids Catholic. And now they're being baptized in her church. It's a Protestant church, Methodist, Episcopalian, Lutheran, take your pick, whatever. And we're not going, at a principle. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. And I rarely tell people what to do. In fact, I rarely ever tell people what to do. But in a case like that, I ask them to seriously reconsider. Okay, let's put this in a proper context. Most adult children of good practicing Catholics don't even go to church at all, right? Your son wants to have your child baptized. All right, it's not ritualistically pure according to your criteria in a Catholic church, but let's look at the positive side. He's going to church and he wants to have his child baptized. And secondly, in 10 years, when you're not in the baptism photographs, do you want to have to explain to your grandchild why you're not in them? I'm not telling you what to do, but family unity versus ritual purity, and that's happened on a number of occasions. But that's a concrete example. It happens. It happens. And you can obviously tell where I lie on that side of the dilemma, right? And then rule number two. What's rule number two in terms of how to deal with dilemmas? Rule number one is mercy always prevails over ritual purity or perfection, right? Religious perfection. Rule number two is we're better together, right? We are better together. I love this image of the Good Samaritan. It's made up, if you can't see it exactly, it's made up of groups of people who form the outline of the injured man and the Samaritan. What does that say, right? Most of the time we need to be in this together. Figuring out what's right and wrong in every situation, or what's the better of two goods, when we're in a dilemma, is not easy. No one of us is wise enough or religious enough to figure it out in every circumstance. We're better together. We need one another. That's what community is all about, to help us figure out life, especially when it gets messy, when we're in the dilemma, the messiness of life. We need to be together. So that's why small groups are really important, so we can talk things out with people who are good Jesus followers, right? Or having a few friends in your life that are good Jesus lovers, right? The people who love Jesus in your life. We can talk out these dilemmas. Don't try to handle it yourself. It was never intended to be that way. Lone Range is figuring out life all by ourselves. Not good. Not good. Remember this image. We're better together, especially when we're trying to figure out the messy dilemmas of life. So, when a scholar of the law wanted to test Jesus and wanted to know how to be perfect according to, nice, neat religious categories, right? And religious perfection, I think there are two rules to think about. One, mercy prevails. Two, we're better together.